And then there were 4 teams. That's right. 4 teams are left in the NFL's playoff for the 2020-2021 season. Ryan Namick, I mean, I can't believe we've got to this point. To be completely honest, you're listening to the Chips podcast. I'm Tyler Melito. That's Ryan Amick, that guy above me or left me or right of me, because I don't know how, honestly, the Zoom thing formats when we put it into YouTube.
I think I'm usually on the left, if I can remember
Usually on the
correctly.
left, but then again, who knows? But anyway, Ryan, how are you doing after that crazy weekend of football?
I was going to say, I'm doing great. They honestly should have named this Super Divisional Round weekend because they named it Super Wildcard Weekend. Because there's some crazy stuff that happened this weekend. Some pretty unfortunate stuff that we'll get into to some star players in this league. But yeah, it was a wild affair. And we got to this point, 4 teams left. And boy, are those some great matchups we're going to preview.
Yeah, some great matchups. We got the Green Bay Packers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the NFC side, which we'll preview first, and then we'll preview the AFC's championship game between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. So let's start on the NFC side, partially because I said we were going to start there. And looking at the Buccaneers first, they played New Orleans last weekend. And, well, first of all, the big news, we're coming from Fox's Jay Glazer. Drew Brees, his last game ever was yesterday. He said before the game, Glazer did, that Brees was going to retire after the season. So, Ryan, what was your initial reaction to Brees' retirement or Glazer's announcement of Brees possibly retiring? And how are you going to remember the guy who defied all the odds, basically?
Yeah, I really hope that he returns for one more season. It doesn't look like that's the case, as Jake Glazer reported. It looks like that would have been his last game as a pro. And I think it is time for him to call it quits. I mean, he's 42 years old. He just turned 42 this last week, actually. His arm does not look the same as it used to be. I mean, his whole career was defined on how accurate he was, how he defied the odds at under 6 foot. He was able to amass 80,000 yards in his career, which right now he's the only player to ever do so. I mean, he's been the stable of accurate passer as long as I can remember him in this league. And it's crazy his story, how he was a kind of not a late round pick, but he wasn't a first rounder with the Chargers, had an injury there, and had kind of a bad career with San Diego, was a free agent. And people weren't very high on Drew Brees, maybe thought he was kind of a bust.
Had the shoulder injury.
Turns it around. Yeah, that shoulder injury, which people thought he couldn't come back from. And when he went to New Orleans, not only did he revive his career, he turned a franchise that had, I think, 2 divisional titles in their entire history and turned them into a Super Bowl winner. Of course, coming off of Hurricane Katrina not too long afterwards. Drew Brees, just what he did for that city of New Orleans, bringing them a title, and also what he did off the field, all the charity work he does, everything he does to empower New Orleans on and off the field. He's a class act. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt. And he will be remembered in our generation as one of the best quarterbacks by far. I mean, you talk about Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, and then Drew Brees. In our generation, those were the guys year in and year out. They were a Pro Bowler. They were in the playoffs. They had some of the best statistics in the league. Drew Brees had a very great career with New Orleans. And the way it ended was kind of bittersweet. I mean, this is 4 straight playoff losses now. A lot of them heartbreakers. 3 of them were at home, including last night's loss against Tampa Bay. And then the one 4 years ago, of course, the Minneapolis Miracle, who could forget that? Mm-hmm. So some really sad playoff exits for Drew Brees with the team that he had, with the talent that he has. People thought that maybe he could have at least got to the Super Bowl, but that was not the case. At least he won it for them in 2009, so he has that to put on his resume. But nonetheless, his resume in New Orleans is already set in stone. He's a clear Hall of Famer in everyone's opinion. And it was just sad last night. Did not have the best game to go out on. I mean, it was in his home stadium at least, but no fans, of course. So it couldn't. No, I would imagine they would have given him a standing ovation after that, especially knowing that this could have been his last game. Ended up throwing 3 picks in the loss to Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. So not the best way to go out, but Drew Brees, we'd all love you to come back for one more year. It doesn't look like your arm can withstand one more year, especially with the 17-game season kicking in next year. It's going to be tough. So no matter what happens, Drew Brees always be a legend on the football field, and hopefully he'll be a legend in the broadcasting booth, which he's set to be on as soon as he retires.
You said it perfectly. I think a couple things that are worth mentioning. One, Brees was always overshadowed You mentioned Brady, you mentioned Manning, Rodgers, Favre for a little bit, and now with this newer generation of Wilson and Mahomes and whatnot. Brees never won an MVP. He rarely was in the MVP discussion. It was always there's someone better. But Brees was just uber consistent every year. Like you mentioned, also all-time leader in passing touchdowns and passing yards. That, I mean, probably won't last long because Brady looks like he still has one more year in him at least. And that's the other thing too. Drew Brees is 42. Tom Brady's 43. Brady looked so much better than Brees just throwing the football last night. He made it look so much easier. He could throw those deep balls. The fact that Drew Brees was subbed out for Jameis Winston because Winston could throw the deep ball and Brees couldn't, just from his arm strength standpoint, just shows you that Brees is done. That he was on his last legs, and this was going to be his last year. I hope it's not his last year as you do. But honestly, I don't even need one more full year. I just want one more game, Drew Brees in the Superdome with those fans cheering him on like they've done for his entire career in New Orleans. Because that's the other thing, too. You mentioned it. Brees was the perfect quarterback for the city of New Orleans when he came there. I believe he went there in 2006, the same time Sean Payton was there. Hurricane Katrina just hit. Brees, he was an underdog with himself. The city of New Orleans was an underdog. The Saints were an underdog. He helps them get back to the promised land. They win their franchise's only Super Bowl, and he becomes a lifelong celebrity in New Orleans. He will never have to buy a drink in the city of New Orleans for as long as he lives, regardless of what he does, unless it's like criminal, but that's not going to happen, I don't think, because Drew Brees seems like an outstanding individual. It's just a sad ending for a man who has had a great career. I also think he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Who knows? Honestly, I guess it all depends on who is in his class, because I would not be surprised if there are some individuals who, when it comes Drew Brees' time for Hall of Fame induction, they're like, maybe he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer because of X, Y, and Z, whatever those reasons are. They're probably wrong, in my opinion. But let's look at the game itself. Buccaneers, utterly dominant. 30 points to New Orleans is 20. 3 interceptions, like you mentioned. They had forced 4 turnovers in all. The Buccaneers defense did. And the Buccaneers offense capitalized. They scored 21 points off those 3 interceptions, or off those 4 turnovers, if I'm not mistaken. And it didn't even look like New Orleans had much of a chance. The Buccaneers, just from top to bottom, looked utterly dominant.
That's the thing. I mean, for most of this game, the Saints actually had the advantage. I mean, you talk about the first quarter in this game, their special teams kicked the rear end of the Buccaneers and almost had them in a 14-point hole. I mean, I think Deontay Harris brought that back, one kick return that set up a field goal, and then had another one to return for a touchdown, but a penalty held that one back. But nonetheless, the Saints had the advantage early on. They were up 20-13 at one point in the third quarter, and it was looking like the Saints, who a lot of people said on paper had the better roster, could have gotten it done on their home turf. But when you're looking at the matchup, Brady and Brees, the younger of the two, but he didn't look like it on the field. Turned the ball over 3 times, but really just credit to Tom Brady, what he's doing at 43. I think the difference between these two is Brady's had some more quinoa shakes or spinach diet. You know, the crazy meals he has to maintain his health at 43. He looks like he's in his 30s. I mean, like he has a supermodel wife. He looks like a supermodel, like not trying to man crush on him or anything.
Are you jealous, Ryan?
Amazing. He looks amazing for 43 is what I'm trying to say. On the field, off the field, you name it. He's been like that his entire career. And it really is Tom versus time. I mean, the first season away from the team he built a dynasty with, gets a new head coach, a totally new team, a whole new environment. They struggle at first and they lose to the Saints twice in the regular season. But towards the end of the year, went on a win streak, really started clicking as a team. And now come postseason time where Tom Brady is really Tom Brady, he showed why he is the best quarterback in NFL history, even more than Brees, who is a first ballot Hall of Famer. Brady's just better, and he played better in this game. But really what helped the Buccaneers and what kind of saved them this one, because they looked like they might have lost this game because the Saints had the advantage for the first 3 quarters at least, as you mentioned, was the turnovers. They scored 3 touchdowns, all off of turnovers. And that's all because they had a short field to go with, and they were just able to execute in the red zone. So yes, kudos to Tom Brady. He played a very solid game. He outplayed Drew Brees in this one, and they have the right to move on to the conference championship and maybe even have a home game in the Super Bowl if they are so lucky.
if they are still lucky. Because that's the other thing, too. It was a 20-20 game after the third quarter, and it really looked like whichever team makes a play will win. And it ultimately came down to that Buccaneers defense. Devin White, a phenomenal game. 11 total tackles. He had the one fumble recovery and just looked good. Just seemed to be all over the field. There's no one can stop him. And this Buccaneers defense, that's my one concern, though. The Saints offense is a lot different than the Packers offense from the standpoint of the Packers offense has a quarterback who can do so much more than the Saints. Aaron Rodgers could do so much. Sure, the Buccaneers were able to bottle up Alvin Kamara. They held Michael Thomas' 0 catches on 4 targets. Drew Brees looked inefficient outside of the one trick play touchdown from Jameis Winston. The Buccaneers defense seemed to have control of this entire game. And I don't know if they'll be able to do that against the Packers. They did that in week 6, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment, but they weren't. I want to shift to the offensive side a little bit because here is my biggest concern with the Buccaneers. Sure, they've looked good on offense, but here's the thing. Ronald Jones was limited. Who knows what his status will be next week. He still had 13 carries for 62 yards, so it looks pretty good there. Leonard Fournette came out strong, 17 carries, 63 yards, while also having 5 catches for 44 yards and a touchdown. But look at the main receivers. Chris Godwin, 4 catches on 7 targets for 34 yards. Rob Gronkowski, 1 catch for 14 yards and 5 targets. Mike Evans had 1 catch on 3 targets for 3 yards and a touchdown. Mike Evans is the best wide receiver Tampa Bay has ever seen. I think that the state of Florida has ever seen, in my opinion. And 1 catch for 3 yards and a touchdown ain't gonna cut it in the NFC Championship game. And then Antonio Brown himself was injured throughout the game, only had 1 catch for 10 yards on 2 targets. So his health is in question. Tom Brady, he needs to utilize all of his weapons to the best of his ability for next week. And I'm mainly talking about the pass catchers. That's Godwin, Brown, Gronkowski, and Evans. If he can use those 4 guys the best he possibly can, the Packers don't stand a chance. But if the Packers can bottle that up a little bit and force Brady to go to guys like Cameron Brate, Scotty Miller, Tyler Johnson, one of his running backs, then the Packers have all the momentum on their side, in my opinion. But I will say, hats off to the Buccaneers. They played a great game in New Orleans to ultimately pull out the victory. And I mean, we've seen it for 20 years now. Tom Brady in a conference championship game is pretty darn good. So you can't count him out entirely. But I have my concerns.
Yeah, for me, they were just relying way too much on the run game. They had 35 carries in this one, and neither running back really excelled in the running department. I'm sorry, I do not know why he keeps doing that. But
what are you doing over there, Ryan? Come on.
I have it on mute, so I didn't think that would happen. But when you have 2 guys, Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones, getting 60 yards apiece, and Ronald Jones, he was pretty injured in this one. You saw him hobbling on a bit of his plays, but he had some explosive running plays. If he could get fully healthy for next week's game, that could be huge for them. But I'd like the Buccaneers to just rely less on the running game and more on their passing game. All those weapons you named who were very ineffective against the Saints. I mean, Marshall Lattimore pretty much shut down Mike Evans. Tony Brown only had 1 catch. Gronkowski, all that. No one really stepped up for the Buccaneers, which is a bit concerning, especially when you have a Green Bay defense which shut down the Rams in their matchup and has someone like a Jair Alexander who can shadow Mike Evans all game, and he might be ineffective again. So it's like, of course you want to rely on your 6-time Super Bowl winning quarterback, but when he has games like this where they kind of struggled scoring until the defense created turnovers and had short field for them to play with, the running game was pretty ineffective and the receivers weren't really getting open. So the offense for the Buccaneers is definitely concerning, especially when you look at the week before. They looked amazing. Tom Brady was throwing the deep ball with ease. They were making big-time plays, and they're relying more on their offense to win that game than their defense. The good thing for the Bucs, they did limit the pressures again against another good rushing defense like the Saints. They did so against the Washington football team, only gave up a couple sacks, and the same with the Saints. So in a game with the Packers, that could be huge for them to continue that protecting Brady, especially if his receivers can't get going with guys in their secondary like Jair Alexander, maybe locking up their guys. Just give Brady time, short passes if the long ball's not working, especially in a cold Lambeau field, which we'll be playing on Sunday. So the Bucs definitely a little worrisome on the offensive end, but defensively, I like that you mentioned Devin White. He was a huge impact player for this team, but did not play against the football team and then made his presence felt against the Saints. Was responsible for 2 of the turnovers that the Bucks forced, including 1 interception on Drew Brees. So look for him to have a very big game for them. And if he does, that could be a big factor in them possibly pulling off the upset.
Definitely, indeed. Let's shift side to the Packers before we talk about the game against the Buccaneers. Let's see how they got there. They thrashed the Rams 32-18, and it was a 3-3 game after the first quarter, but it didn't look like the Rams had much chance. Aaron Rodgers continuing his MVP campaign, 23 for 36, 2 touchdowns, 296 yards, and really didn't have to do all that much. Ryan, what's your assessment of the Packers team that has really looked dominant all season long?
Yeah, this is the last thing the Bucks wanted to see. I mean, the Packers almost looked untouchable in this game. You're talking about, on paper, the best defensive team in the league in terms of run and passing. And the Packers hung 32 points on them, the most points scored of the divisional round. And Aaron Rodgers, he didn't get pressured at all this game. I mean, part of that has to do with Aaron Donald. He was out there, but he definitely wasn't healthy, was a non-factor in this game, which is not something you see from a stud player like him. But he gave it his all out there. But the offensive line of the Packers, like they've done all season long, they protected Aaron Rodgers, and they relied a lot on their running game and play action, and that's how they got a lot of their offense going. And one of the scariest things of the Packers offense that I saw, the Rams had a nice drive down the field to score a touchdown right before halftime to make it a 1-score game. And in under 30 seconds, Aaron Rodgers drives the length of the field and almost scores a touchdown, but they end up settling for a field goal. Just the fact that this offense in under 30 seconds could put up points like that with all the playmakers this team has, with Aaron Rodgers, the legendary quarterback he is already, having possibly his best season so far. I mean, the best thing, honestly, we weren't thinking about this during draft night, but the best thing the Packers might have done is drafting Jordan Love, because boy, did that light a fire under him, because he just went on a mission this year. Not only is he going to win the MVP, he's in the conference championship game at home, and I think the Packers have the absolute advantage in this game going up with the Bucks. I mean, talk about the quarterback play. 2 legendary quarterbacks. The first time we've seen these two in the playoffs, we saw Brady and Brees face off in the playoffs for the first time, and Brady got the advantage. Now it's Rodgers, Brady the first time in the playoffs, and I think the advantage goes to Rodgers. I mean, he looked flawless against a very good Rams defense. Devontae Adams, he shut down any trash talk Jalen Ramsey had his way. He scored a touchdown, was very effective, was the most targeted guy on the Packers team. And like I said, with the running game, they had 3 backs all contributing big-time plays for the Packers. Aaron Jones busted out a 60-yard run and then finished it off with a touchdown. Jamal Williams was looking like the hardest guy to tackle on the field on some plays. I mean, he had some big-time runs, and even the rookie A.J. Dillon was getting some pretty big plays as well. So when you have a backfield, running back by committee backfield like that, that's being effective, you use that to put in for your play action game, which is a big reason why Allen Lazard was open for that big touchdown. Even though he dropped 1 pass earlier in the game, he more than made up for it with that pretty much dagger touchdown that sent the Packers into the conference championship game. And just when you have Rodgers playing at a level like this, I really don't see anyone, and I mean anyone, stopping this team. But the Bucks are a very good matchup for the Packers as well. And it all starts with the quarterback play.
It all starts with the quarterback play, indeed. And I'm looking for, in that Green Bay game against Tampa Bay, who is the second guy behind Devontae Adams? Because we saw it last week with this weekend with Tampa Bay and New Orleans. Michael Thomas, although has had a bad year, he's still the best receiver on that New Orleans roster. So who's the next guy up to step up? It looked like to be a lot of Emmanuel Sanders and a little bit of Jared Cook and Alvin Kamara, depending on the situation of the game. And that could be the same case here. I don't think the Buccaneers will be able to shut down Devontae Adams as they did Michael Thomas, because remember, in their first game of the season between these two teams, because they met up in week 6, Adams had 6 catches for 61 yards, but was a little bit banged up, was not 100%. He was dealing with the hamstring injury that limited him early on in the year. So is it going to be a Marquez Valdez-Scantling? Is it going to be a Robert Tonyan, who has emerged a lot more from that earlier game? Will it be Allen Lazard, who didn't even play in that first matchup between these two teams? So who's going to be that guy that steps up? And then looking at the running game against Tampa Bay in their first game, Jamal Williams was the leading rusher with 4 carries and 34 yards. A.J. Dillon, 5 carries of 31 yards. Aaron Jones, 10 carries, 15 yards, and a touchdown. That can't happen again if the Packers want to have any chance. And I don't think it will happen again because this is a lot different team from when they were in week 6 on both sides. Let's be real here. But I think the Packers have a little bit more going for them. Remember, the Buccaneers got out to that really hot start. The Packers, I wouldn't necessarily say started slow, but they were not looking as good as they are right now. So let's preview this game a little bit. Ryan, what is your big storyline? Is there anything from week 6 matchup between these two teams that catches your eye? What is it about this Green Bay Packers team versus this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that has got you excited?
Well, just like the Bucks and Saints, the regular season matchups really didn't tell much of the tale when it comes to the postseason. I mean, the Saints got the advantage big time in their matchups during the regular season, and the Bucks beat them in the playoffs. I think the same goes for the Packers. By far their worst loss of the season, an embarrassing blowout at the hands of the Bucks. That's not going to happen again. I think the Packers have a much bigger advantage in this one, not only playing at home, but the fact that the Buccaneers came off of a performance where they struggled offensively and really only scored off of turnovers. When you talk about the Packers, the last thing you talk about is turnovers, especially considering Aaron Rodgers at home playing the way that he is, and the fact that the Buccaneers have really struggled rushing the passer in their past couple of games, while the Packers have made Rodgers untouchable pretty much. He had no pressures in the Rams game against one of the best rush defenses in the league. And I see the same thing going in this situation. If you can't pressure Aaron Rodgers, you're not going to be able to force turnovers, and you're not going to be able to match up with all the weapons that they have offensively. So I think the advantage goes to the Packers, and I expect them to win this game.
I agree with you. I do think the Packers are going to win because let's remember also, Aaron Rodgers threw 2 interceptions in that first game against Tampa Bay. Rodgers had 5 all season, so he doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes. They're at home. It's going to be cold. That's the Packers element. Not so much the Buccaneers, so that'll be an interesting storyline. Definitely, I'm sure they're talking about that all week long on the sports shows. And the other thing, too, you mentioned the pass rush. I don't think Drew Brees was sacked once last week. And I think the offensive line for the Packers has had their best year by far, despite losing David Bakhtiari to an injury. They've looked good they looked good last week against the Rams, against the number 1 defense in the entire NFL during the regular season. This is going to be an entertaining game. At least I hope it will be. But I think the Packers, they just got too many advantages. They got the best wide receiver in football, the best quarterback in football, arguably this season, not for all of football, like just 2020. Aaron Rodgers has been the best quarterback. They got a far better advantage in the running game. It's just going to come down to the defense. Can the Packers defense make enough plays to slow down this Tampa Bay offense? If they can, bada bang. Green Bay going back to the Super Bowl for the first time since they won it all in 2011. If not, however, this game could be a shootout, and it could just ultimately come down to who has the ball last. But I agree with you. The Packers are going to pull out the victory in this one. Let's shift over to the AFC side where, Ryan, we're going to have some fun. We got the Kansas City Chiefs, the number 1 seed, the reigning Super Bowl champions, against maybe the most fun team in the NFL this season. Our Central New York favorites, the Buffalo Bills. Neither of our favorite teams, but being that we're Syracuse students, we hear all about it. And frankly, it'd be kind of fun to see the Bills in the Super Bowl. Let's be real here. But
yeah, they're secretly becoming my second favorite team. I'm not trying to hop on the Bills Mafia bandwagon. I respect their fan base. They're a great fan base. I mean, we'll get to their Ravens-Bills game in a second. The Bills ended up winning that game. And in the end, with Lamar Jackson ended up getting injured with a concussion, they ended up donating to his charity because they felt bad for him. And that's just it goes to show how great of a fan base that is. I mean, the Bills deserve this more than almost any other team in the playoffs right now. I'm so happy for what they've done this season. The Josh Allen-Stephon Diggs duo is one of my favorites in the league. They look as like 2 peas in a pod. I mean, Bill's story is phenomenal. I'm so glad they've gotten this far. And yeah, I mean, this should be a great matchup for sure.
Well, let's look at that Bills game against Baltimore on Saturday night. It was a 17-3 win for Buffalo, but really, I didn't think Buffalo looked that good. They made the plays on defense that they needed to slow down the Ravens. Obviously, the pick 6 being of note. But the Bills' offense did not look great. Josh Allen, 23 completions on 37 attempts, 206 yards, and a touchdown, a QBR of 51. The running game was atrocious. Allen had 7 carries for 3 yards. Devin Singletary led the team in rushing yards with 25. The absence of Zach Moss is going to be huge, if he plays or not. And then the receiving game, Stephon Diggs continues his great year. 8 catches, 106 yards, and a touchdown. John Brown had 8 catches for 62 yards. Okay, he hasn't been great all season. And then you look at the rest of it, though. Cole Beasley, 2 targets, no catches. Isaiah McKenzie, who's big in that game against the Colts, 2 catches for 8 yards. It really was not much else after Stephon Diggs, and maybe John Brown if you want to include him. And then also you had the Ravens miscues of Justin Tucker missing 2 field goals. That never happens. So I don't know if necessarily the Bills won this game, more so that the Ravens lost it. But either way, the Bills are going to the AFC Championship and could be a formidable opponent to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, the first half of the Bills-Ravens game was a disaster for both sides. I mean, by far, the win factor was a huge effect. And we haven't seen a Bills team play this deep into January in years. So it wasn't usual for either team to witness what it's like to play in upstate New York with all the lake effects, the wind, everything that goes on in the chilly effects of upstate New York that we know by going to Syracuse. It get cold and windy up there. And it got really cold and windy in this game, which was a huge reason why, as you mentioned, Justin Tucker, the most accurate kicker in NFL history, missed 2 field goals in the first half. But it was pretty impressive because he doinked 1 off the left upright and 1 off the right upright. So if he was trying to do that, man, that's some accuracy right there. Obviously, he wasn't trying to do that. But for him, in 2 playoff games, he missed 3 field goals. So he was just having a very rough postseason, unlike what we've seen from a great kicker like him. And also on the Bills side, Tyler Bass missed a field goal after last week. He set a record for hitting a 54-yard field goal as a rookie, the longest to ever do so as a rookie. So he was on fire throughout the regular season and in the playoffs. And they both missed field goals to leave points on the board in the first half. It ended up being 3-3 at halftime. So it was essentially a 0-0 game. And the Bills just came out in that third quarter and they took advantage. And that's where they won the game. That's where they scored their 2 touchdowns. And that's where the Ravens season fell apart. That third quarter was a complete disaster for the Ravens. From, of course, the Teron Johnson 101-yard pick six, the first interception Lamar Jackson has thrown in the red zone in his career. Could not have come at a worse time. It put the Bills up 17-3. And the very next play, when the Ravens get the ball back, the snapper, who had very big issues throughout the game, put the ball over Lamar's head, almost results in a safety, and instead results in Lamar Jackson getting concussed on the play and out for the game. I mean, you could not have a worse 2-play sequence if you tried. I mean, the Ravens in 2 plays saw their very promising season just vanish like that. So it was unfortunate for the Ravens that Lamar couldn't play this game out because Tyler Huntley came in, a relatively unknown player. He almost had the Ravens scoring on 2 chances. First, you have the overthrow of Marquise Hollywood Brown that if Lamar Jackson was in, he might make that throw, and that might be 6 points right there. Then the next possession, they're 4th and goal, ready to score as well. And you have to think, if Lamar Jackson's in on that series, he might be tying the game up at 17-all. So really, the injury to Lamar Jackson, of course, the interception hurt them. They drove all the way down the field just for a pick six to be the result. But the fact that he was not able to finish the game and maybe come back and beat the Bills because he suffered that concussion, that's just a really sour way for your season to end. But in this game, especially in the first half, we just saw 2 very one-dimensional offenses. You mentioned the Bills, very pass-heavy during a windy game as well. You would think with all the wind and everything, you might want to go to your run game a little more. They had one designed run the entire first half. They rely so much on Josh Allen. It's crazy. Of course, the Zach Moss injury doesn't help them and was a big reason why they just abandoned the run game in general. But when you're one-dimensional like that, it's so easy, especially for a great Baltimore secondary, to just focus on Josh Allen and try to eliminate him because he's really the only player who could create offense for the Bills. And then on the Ravens side, very run-heavy, of course, with Lamar Jackson at the helm, Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins. They were running the ball the majority of the first half, and the Bills had a great design to stop them. They have great linebackers in Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds who were able to guard the edges and not let any big plays go on the run game, and were forcing Lamar Jackson to throw the ball, which he did not do very effectively, only 14 for 24, and of course that interception. Did not have a great game throwing it. But I think that has less to say about Lamar's skills and more to say about the lack of playmakers that the Ravens have. I mean, we mentioned Marquise Hollywood Brown, probably his best target. He's not more than maybe wide receiver 2 or 3 on any other team. He's a deep threat kind of guy. He has some trouble catching the ball, and he's just not very reliable. Mark Andrews had a great season last year, but had issues dropping the ball and just getting open this season as well. And then you're relying guys like Des Bryant, who hasn't played in years, Miles Boykin, Willie Snead. I mean, these are not players you need to surround Lamar Jackson with, especially because you know his limitations throwing the ball. Of course, you know how dynamic he is running the ball, and he has that deep ball ability where he can throw to someone like a Brown and connect on them on most occasions. But with more intermediate routes, stuff like that, you need more guys who are solid route runners who create separation and can make it easier for Lamar to throw the ball more so they're not so one-dimensional, and so that the Bills don't have to just load the box, stop the run, and then the Ravens have really no game plan and end up putting 3 points up in a playoff game, which is never going to win you the game. So the Ravens going into next year, they have to work on getting more playmakers to surround Lamar Jackson. And the Bills going into this week's championship game, they need to find a way to not just rely completely on Josh Allen, because especially with the Josh Allen-Patrick Mahomes matchup, Mahomes has, even though he is coming off a concussion, he has the advantage because he is the better player. And if you're going to rely just on Josh Allen to defeat Patrick Mahomes by himself, I don't know if that works every time.
Yeah, well, first of all, with the Ravens, I agree with you. They need to find another weapon. I think when they did not sign Antonio Brown and he ended up going to Tampa Bay, that was a major loss for the Ravens, even though he wasn't even on their roster, because Antonio Brown can be a number one wide receiver. We've seen it for years during his time in Pittsburgh, and he would have been a great addition to a Ravens team that becomes not just a one-dimensional running team, but at least somewhat of a threat to throw the ball. And he would be playing with his cousin, with Hollywood Brown. Brown had been fun. And then on the Bills side, I agree with you. They can't rely so much on Josh Allen. But let's look at how the Kansas City Chiefs got there to the AFC Championship for the third straight season before we talk about their matchup with the Bills. And you mentioned Patrick Mahomes did a concussion. So I read this morning, it was not a concussion. I don't think it is, according to reports. It was actually nerve issues in his neck. That's what caused him. It wasn't a head injury. He is alert. He's passing all the tests.
I was just looking at the tackle. It looked like it more was a neck injury. His head didn't hit the ground or anything. The player didn't hit his head. It looked more he was hooking the neck. And when he got up, though, it was pretty scary. He couldn't get up under his own power. But it's good to hear it wasn't a concussion, so maybe he could play next Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, it is good to hear that it wasn't. It could have been a lot worse. Let's be real here. But he's alert. He was passing all the tests that the Chiefs medical staff was running on him today, according to reports. He was even tweeting last night, I saw, I think, a little bit. Now, granted, I don't know if Patrick Mahomes runs his own Twitter page or does he have someone else doing it, but who knows? But he left that game in the middle of the third quarter. It's now questionable for Sunday's game. And once Mahomes left, that was a telltale sign of how good Patrick Mahomes makes this team. Because Chad Henne, he only threw 8 passes in the game, but he threw an interception, 66 yards. And wish I had this in front of me. What were Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce's numbers with Mahomes and then with Henne? Because that's a telltale sign as well. Because I was saying this to my dad before Mahomes left the game. Without Mahomes, the Chiefs would be a good team. With Mahomes, they're a great team, if not the best team in the NFL. So if he's not playing or not 100% against the Bills, that makes this a much more level playing field. Now, granted, Chad Henne will be more prepared. He's not going to just be thrown into the fire necessarily, but it will not be the same Chiefs offense we're so used to. The Chiefs, they look good. Let's be real here. In the time that Mahomes was on the field, Mahomes 21 for 30, 255, and a touchdown. Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill are just absolute weapons. And I like what they were doing. They tried to unlock Mecole Hardman a little bit. He had 4 catches for 58 yards. Maybe they can use him a little bit more next week to really spread out this Bills defense. Sammy Watkins might be coming back as well. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was out for this game against the Browns. Maybe his return will have a big impact for this team, at least in the passing games, because the running game, let's be real, the Chiefs, they don't really need to run the ball because they could score in a blink of an eye. If the Bills more so need it because they can't do that. But overall, I think the Chiefs, sure, it was a 5-point game. The Browns had a chance at the end, but they really didn't have much of a chance, at least in my opinion.
Well, the thing that you talk about the running game, I think what I took away most from this game for the Chiefs side is just how dynamic this offense is. Of course, with Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, it's the best passing attack maybe in the league. But in this game, we saw, as you mentioned, McCole Hardman was getting some jet sweep opportunities where he was using his speed to get on the edge and pick up first downs. Tyreek Hill, same thing. He was getting some jet sweep opportunities. And Hill, there was almost no difference between Mahomes and Henny out there. I mean, he was playing great with Mahomes out there, and then he had a phenomenal catch over Denzel Ward. I mean, everyone knows Tyreek Hill for his speed. What they don't know is how good he is at catching the ball at the high point, just getting off the ground and using, even though he is a small guy, just being able to jump over defenders and get catches like that. That was a huge momentum play for them. And of course, the fourth down gutsy call by Andy Reid. It looked like they were going to just try to draw the Cleveland Browns defenders offsides. And they actually have a pass call with the game almost on the line, and Tyreek Hill is able to get open, get them the first down to win the game. Tyreek Hill is just so dynamic for this offense, and just this whole offense in general is so dynamic. I mean, Darrell Williams, who was their third string coming into this game, had 78 yards and was pretty effective. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he wasn't in this game, but he might be coming back for the Bills game. So if they're able to, of course, mesh this amazing passing game with a very reliable run game that did damage against the Browns and had even more productivity than the Browns running backs did, talking about Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, two very solid running backs, and the Chiefs outrushed them. So the fact that this offense could get it done in any way possible, of course, it helps if you have a healthy Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. Even if he plays on Sunday, he not only had a toe injury that he was dealing with during the game, but of course, the neck injury he's going to be dealing with as well. That might limit his play or prevent him from playing at all. That's yet to be seen. But if he's out there, he won't be at 100%, but he can at least rely on Andy Reid's play calling and all the weapons he has on this offense to give the Bills trouble. Because if you're going to a shootout with the Chiefs, it usually doesn't go well. And the Bills are the perfect team to have a shootout with the Chiefs. So I'm really looking forward to that matchup. But just talking one more thing about this Browns-Chiefs game, the Chiefs were at a huge advantage in this one. They were up 19-3 at halftime. First possession on the Browns of the second half, Baker Mayfield throws a pick to Tyrann Mathieu. It looks like the game was over at that point. They end up settling for a field goal, and then Harrison Butker misses that kick. So it gives the Browns some life. They end up scoring the next drive to make it a 19-10 game, and then the Patrick Mahomes injury happens. Then the Browns get some momentum. They end up scoring, and I envisioned myself watching a Bills-Browns AFC Championship game.
Oh, dear God.
I mean, I'm proud for both those fan bases, but that is just not what I wanted. I mean, kudos to Baker Mayfield and the Browns.
Great season by the Browns.
Season and this postseason is sensational. But just envisioning the Browns having a chance to go to the Super Bowl after not seeing them in the playoffs my entire life, I just wasn't ready for that. And kudos for the Chiefs getting it done with all odds stacked against them, getting it done for their quarterback, not losing on their home turf to the Browns, and etching out this very close win. And yeah, so now we're set up for the matchup a lot of people were looking forward to at the beginning of the season, or at least throughout the season when they noticed how good Josh Allen was. The Bills and their dynamic offense against the Chiefs and their Super Bowl winning sensational offense with playmakers everywhere. It's going to be a show for the ages. There's a reason it's the prime time game. Two very young quarterbacks with a lot on the line, and it should be a very good matchup. And I'm interested. Who do you think is going to come out in this one?
Well, there are some things that we got to look at, first of all. One, these two teams actually played earlier this year. They played in week 6. The Chiefs won that game 26-17 in Buffalo. Looking at the stat lines, Patrick Mahomes, 21 for 26, 2 touchdowns. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, monster game. 26 carries for 161 yards. Mahomes also had 10 carries for 36. And then look at the pass catchers. Tyreek Hill did not have a great game. 3 catches for 20. Travis Kelce, 5 catches, 65 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Demarcus Robinson was the leading receiver on this team with 5 catches, 69 yards. So maybe not great there. Then you look at the Bills side. The run game was atrocious once again. 23 carries, 84 yards for the team. Josh Allen led the team in rushing with 42 yards. Passing the ball, Josh Allen did not have his best game. 14 completions on 27 attempts, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Passing an average of 4.5 yards per completion. Not great. And then Stephon Diggs, 6 catches and a touchdown, but only for 46 yards. That is the second fewest number of yards in a game this season. The lowest he had was against the Chargers, where he only had 39 in a game that the Bills won. So on both sides, the defenses could be really crucial here. And if I had to pick one defense to stop the other's offense, it's Kansas City. We saw it against Cleveland. Kansas City can guard really well against a top running game, and they can make plays in the passing game as well. And this is a Buffalo team that does not have a running game, without question. We've been saying this all for as long as I can remember. We've done it every episode, even back in the when we were in the WERW studio. I almost said the Chip studio, which would be sick, but
that would be cool.
One day down the road, that would be the dream. So if they can just stop Josh Allen, the Chiefs have this in the bag, because the Chiefs offense with Mahomes is unstoppable. I mean, knock on wood, because obviously anyone could stop this team. The Raiders did it somewhat for the Chiefs' main only loss with Mahomes this year. But with Mahomes, this team's going to put up points. The question is, who's the quarterback for Kansas City, and Kansas City's defense stop Josh Allen? If Mahomes is starting and they stop Josh Allen, Chiefs win. If Mahomes is starting and Josh Allen plays well, I still think the Chiefs win, but it's going to be a close game. If Mahomes is on the bench and Chad Henne is starting, or whoever it is, and Josh Allen plays well or even plays okay, I think the Bills have a legitimate chance. But ultimately, to answer your question, Ryan, I am going to go with the Kansas City Chiefs making it back to their second straight Super Bowl, just because they are that good. I think Mahomes is going to be fine. He's healthy. And I think he may not have the best game of his career by any stretch, but he just being on the field is just that good. It's almost like having a decoy. I remember I was watching Football Life for Terrell Davis, one of the few guys who ever rushed for 2,000 yards. Dealt with migraines throughout his career. And in the Super Bowl against the Green Bay Packers, I believe it was in 1998, Terrell Davis had a migraine, but they still put him in. They were like, all we need you to do is just be on the field, because if you're not on the field, they will not believe that we're running the football. That's the same way with Mahomes. Just him as a decoy and just being not even 100% is still better than a lot of quarterbacks on any team. So Mahomes playing, that gives the Chiefs an automatic win, in my opinion. But another game I hope that is exciting, it's close, and it's just fun to watch, because we got two young quarterbacks who could be dueling out in the AFC Championship game, or just even the playoffs, for years and years to come, assuming they're both healthy.
Yeah, I'm of the mindset that Mahomes is going to be out there playing, whether he's healthy or not, because they just need him that much. And even if Mahomes is 80% of himself, I think that essentially is equal to Josh Allen. I mean, an 80% Patrick Mahomes and a Josh Allen, that's a very, very even matchup, because of course a healthy Mahomes is better than almost anyone in the league. So with a not as healthy Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, that's a very equal matchup. So I'm going to talk more on the offensive side, because I do agree with you. I think the Chiefs do have a bit of an edge defensively, especially with Tyrann Mathieu on the field. It kind of takes away that deep ball to Stephon Diggs, or at least limits it a little bit. It puts Josh Allen on his toes, because he knows there's a bad man back there who could pick off his balls at any minute. Because even though
Stephon Diggs, smart guy back there too, Tyrann Mathieu is a very astute safety.
Seasoned veteran, he knows where the ball is going to be at any time. We saw last week he picked off a ball in a very key moment, so he's going to be a problem for that offense as well. And looking at these offenses, we mentioned the Bills have no run game. They are pretty one-dimensional and very reliant on Josh Allen. Josh Allen did not have the best game of the year against the Chiefs when they first played, and I think it could be a struggle in this game as well. Looking at the Chiefs offense, even if Mahomes relies on the run game more, we saw Darrell Williams get it done last week. Clyde Edwards-Helaire should be back, and he had a great game against the Bills when they played. The Bills, they did a pretty good job stopping the Ravens' run game last week, because they were pretty much catered to stopping that. Their defense was set up to limit Lamar Jackson in their run game. They're not going to do this against the Chiefs offense, because of how many elite players they have on it. So that being said, I think they could take advantage of the Bills offense, throw some run plays in there, some more jet sweeps that worked against the Browns, and probably will work against the Bills. The one thing that the Bills have going for them, they have very good cover linebackers, especially Matt Milano, who could give Travis Kelce problems. We saw last week he didn't have problems putting guys like Denzel Ward on the ground with his amazing route running, which he ended up scoring a touchdown on that play. So if Travis Kelce is limited in this game, that could definitely hemorrhage Patrick Mahomes, who might not be fully healthy. If you take away arguably his favorite target, that's a way to maybe beat the Chiefs. But I think with the speed they have with guys like Hardman and Hill, the backfield that I mentioned already, this offense is much more not one dimensional like the Bills is. They have Andy Reid calling plays that we've never seen before, and catching defenses on their toes, as we saw at the end of the Browns game. I think the coaching alone is an advantage that the Bills can't keep up with on the offensive end. I think the defenses are pretty similar, and none will probably be thriving in this game because of how great these offenses are and how great these quarterbacks are. And I think in a shootout at home with the Chiefs, essentially with their main roster intact, I think they get it done against the Bills and find their way to the Super Bowl yet again.
So we have both number one seeds in the Super Bowl, which pains me to do because I hate going chalk always, but that's just the case here. The Packers and the Chiefs have been the best two teams in the season and are on a crash course to the Super Bowl. One other thing of note with the Chiefs defense, we mentioned Tyrann Mathieu, but there are some other really talented players on that defense. Chris Jones, one of the best pass rushers. Daniel Sorensen with the really key play at the end of the first half, forcing the fumble out. Sure, they might have missed a penalty for leading with the helmet, but that was a questionable play. But a really heads-up play to knock the ball out and deny Rashad Higgins from scoring that touchdown, which who knows what happened with that game. Mahomes gets hurt. The Browns were only down a score. I believe they would only been down 3 points entering halftime. Who knows what would have happened then? But there are some really good pieces on this defense. But it should be a great weekend of football. Hopefully, we got some intense games, some close games, no major injuries, and it just leads to a Super Bowl for a season that we just did not expect to get to this point. Any final notes, Ryan?
Just looking at the quarterbacks in this matchup, I don't think we could have asked for a better ensemble of QBs. I mean, you're talking about 3 of the leading MVP candidates, and Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen. And the fourth guy is just maybe the best quarterback ever, who has an opportunity to play a home game in the Super Bowl for the first time ever. So many players have stuff on the line, so much great talent at the quarterback position. And it just shows how quarterback driven this league is. If you do not have a sensational quarterback, it's hard to go far in the NFL. And all these teams by far have sensational, great quarterbacks. 2 teams have 2 quarterbacks who look like they'll be great for 10 plus years to come. And 2 quarterbacks are more on the end of their careers, especially looking at Tom Brady. But nonetheless, we should have great quarterback play, a lot of offense to look forward to. Please, God, no more injuries. I was crushed when I saw Patrick Mahomes go down, not even 24 hours after seeing Lamar Jackson go down. Do not want that to happen again. Just hope for healthiness amongst all the teams, hope for some great action, and this should be just as wild as the other 2 rounds of the playoffs were, because this postseason might be one of the more memorable ones, not just because the season was so memorable because of how crazy it is, but just what we've seen so far, the expanded playoffs, the amount of games we've seen, all this action has been great, and it should lead up to coming into the season, a lot of people would say these are definitely the 4 best teams with 4 of the better quarterbacks in the league. They've earned their spots here. It should be great matchups to come. And despite us both picking the same teams, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bucs or the Bills win. I mean, they're both very, especially looking at the Bills one with the Patrick Mahomes factor of health. The Bills, I'd be a fool to say they don't have a shot in this game, because a lot of people, that was the hot pick to beat the Chiefs, was the Bills, and there's a reason for it. Their offense has been sensational all year long, and it should be in next week's matchup. So yeah, just a great week of football to look forward to.
Well, a great day of football because it's Sunday, January.
No more Saturday Sundays. That's
just one day. Championship Sunday, January 24th, first game. Packers, Buccaneers in Green Bay at 3:05 on Fox. Then you got Bills at Chiefs, 6:40 on CBS. Ryan, enjoy next week. Enjoy this coming week, because I know you'll be anxiously waiting for Sunday, as will I. So just enjoy the basketball. Enjoy the Knicks getting their second straight victory. Who knows? Maybe they'll get more, although unlikely because it's the Knicks. Thank you all so much for listening or watching or whatever you do while listening to us babble about sports. We really appreciate it. This has been the Chips Podcast. For Ryan Amick, I'm Tyler Melito. We'll see you maybe, if not next week, in 2 weeks when we preview the Super Bowl.